first live program of the year 2012. And joining us this hour is a man who really doesn't need any introduction after all these years. Lindsey Williams, who has people all around the world literally following his words, his statements, his writings, his DVDs, which are extraordinarily interesting, to say it mildly. And Lindsey is back tonight because I asked him if he would join us to kind of start off the year and give us his view with his remarkable connections to the very top. Of course, one of those, Mr. Ken Fromm, passed away, but Lindsey's connections are legendary now, and his information usually just amazing. Are you there, Lindsey?
The second day of 2012, and Jeff, it is a privilege to be on the Jeff Rense Show tonight.
Well, thank you, sir. I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm glad you're here.
It's, I look back over these years, Jeff, and now we're up to 2012, which none of us ever quite thought it would get to the place that it is, and we'd see it in our lifetime, but it looks as though we have. So I look back on these years, and I am so honored and privileged that the Lord would allow me years ago to be invited by the elite to be their chaplain for 3 years' time, so that I could, as we begin the year 2012, tell you the very latest on what the elite have planned. I mean, I honestly believe, Jeff, that I can save people their life's fortunes. I think if people will take action immediately, they can outwit the New World Order and their elitist plans for the year 2012. You're going to have to do something immediately in order to do it. You can't wait around. But over these years, these people have given me information. Now, of course, the people whom I knew back 35 years ago are in their 70s and their 80s. And I honestly believe, Jeff, that they're trying to clear their conscience, because they're giving me things that I don't think they would have given me 5, 10 years ago. And this very latest one, like when it was given to me just a matter of days ago, I sat here almost shaking, thinking of why I would be allowed to have this information, to be able to pass it on to your audience tonight, to those who will be willing to listen and take action. And Jeff, you're reaching millions of people out there. Your website, invariably, I have someone call me nearly every day and say, have you seen what Jeff Rense had on this website? Folks, you've got to keep up with this day by day, because 2012 is going to be the most unusual and eventful year in 2,000 years. I say this without any hesitation at all, knowing what it is that the elite have told me of their very latest plans, Jeff.
Well, I think people are going to sit around and react as best they can to these things that are coming, and there are many of them, as we've talked in the past. I don't know when it was you were first on the program. It's got to be 12, 14 years ago, something like that. But we know that these plans aren't just cooked up overnight. And what's coming this year, probably in all likelihood, will be lots of fast and furious, no pun intended, events, episodes, contrived and very unpleasant news items, shall we say, will be assaulting people's sensitivities all the time from around the world. We cannot be reactive. We've got to stay proactive. But how do you remain proactive when you really can't get the truth from the MSM, which is where most Americans, unfortunately, tragically, go for their news, to the MSM. But that's just the way it is. They lie. They cheat, because they're not dealing with reality and truth. They're cheating us out of our real. We have a birthright in this country to have journalism serve the nation. That doesn't do that anymore. The communist news network, CNN, is so egregious, so outrageous in its propaganda and its corruption of reality that I'm amazed anyone watches it at all. It's like a freak show if you get what's going on. But anyway, enough of that. What do your sources, and you've got one really good one left, tell you, Lindsey, is in store for us this year?
There is one thing that every single person listening to your broadcast tonight is going to face. No one, let's put it this way, I'm 75 years of age. Not a single person my age has ever faced this in their lifetime and you are going to face it. I do not know the date. They aren't willing to give me a date. But what I'm about to give you tonight, if you will take action right now, if you will immediately do something, and most of what you should do, you're hearing right there on Jeff Rense Show night after night after night after night. But then you can devise, according to your own financial condition and what you would like to be after all of this, or when all of this takes place, you can do something about it. Let me go back just briefly again to something I learned when I lived with the elite. Keeping in mind, of course, all of the listeners out there, you always have new listeners and new people going to your website, Jeff, and I'm sure most of them know by now that I was actually invited to be the chaplain to the elite many years ago for a 3-year period. I met many of those people and learned some things from them that were invaluable to me. One of them is they do have a code of ethics. Now, this code of ethics is completely different than what your code of ethics or mine would be, Jeff, but it is a code of ethics of their own sorts, and one facet of it is that they must tell the world what they're going to do before they do it. And I think this has been told to us, and the thing that is so startling is that the elite will say they're going to do something. They'll tell you, just like George Bush Sr. said years ago, New World Order. Well, now he looks back and says, hey, I told you what I was going to do. Why didn't you listen to me? He used to use the expression, 1,000 points of light. Well, we look back now and we say, you were saying something. He said, yes, and I tried to tell you and you wouldn't listen. Well, what I'm going to give you tonight will be just that. They have told you. They have even put it on the web. It is in print. It was stated at an organization where anyone can go and get the notes from the organization. And after they have done it, and again, I'll say I do not have a date. I wish they'd give me one. You remember Mr. Fromm years ago when he was alive? He gave me the date. He said within less than 3 months, the price of crude oil is going from $147 a barrel to $50 a barrel. People laughed at me for 3 months' time. And finally, I was right here on your show and gave it also. Then when it finally took place, people said, you're a prophet. And I said, no, I'm not. I just happened to, by the providence of God, be in the right place at the right time to get the information. Well, I'm telling you now, ahead of time, you have been willing to believe me over these past 35 years, and not once anything that the elite have ever said has failed to take place as they said it. They have said this, and I'm going to tell you where to go and find it. Their code of ethics is they must tell you what they're going to do before they do it. And they have already told you. And then after they do it, they will come back and say, we told you. Why didn't you listen to us? So let me begin right here and give you a date. I want you to do your homework. Don't you dare leave before you hear all of this broadcast, because you need to get the background and understand the details. Then when you do, you can go and get it for yourself. But at least if you have pencil and paper right now, I will tell you where to go, just as I was told a few days ago. Did you hear that? I said, as I was told a few days ago, go and look this up, and that is what's going to happen next. I hope you heard that. Now, I'm going to tell you exactly as it was told to me. Here's the date. You have pencils and paper. If you fail to take action on this, it won't be because you haven't been told. And after it's all over with, I'm going to have to do the same thing the elite have done before. I'm going to have to say, I told you so, why didn't you listen to it? And here it is. The date is November the 21st, 2002. Well, I know you thought I was going to say 2012, didn't you? No, November the 21st, 2002. You need to go on the web and look up the speech of then Governor Ben Bernanke, who now is chairman of the Federal Reserve. And Governor then, before he became the chairman of the Federal Reserve, made a speech, and it was made on November 21st, 2002, to the National Economist Club of Washington, D.C. You will find it on the web. I imagine they're being deluged right now after so many people being given this. And Governor Bernanke, in that speech told exactly what the elite had planned to do. Now, most of the people that I've talked to lately have said that they believe that the reason that Ben Bernanke was elected as the chairman of the Federal Reserve is because of this speech, and they were so pleased with what he said he would do that he was given the job of being chairman of the Federal Reserve. Right. And he said what he was going to do. Right. He's telling you ahead of time. Let me give it one more time. You cannot miss this. I'm warning you in advance. It's going to be hard reading. This is not easy. He gives bankers terms. I'm going to give it to you in common sense, horse sense terms tonight, because that's what I am. I'm just an everyday, ordinary guy that by the providence of God was put in the right place at the right time so that I could help you over all of these years be able to spare what you do have, whether it be large or small, and to save yourself heartache. And I believe that's the reason God put me there, so I could produce these DVDs and do radio shows over these years and help you spare yourself and your household. And tonight, I hope that I can help spare you with an event, and you can take precaution right now and win over this. But you've got to do it. Now,
hang on, Lindsey. We have to hold on. We have to pause, and we'll come right back and pick it up in just a minute. That speech is, I've looked at it. It is dry. It's not that long. You can get through it, but it's obviously something that should be studied very carefully by people who really care about learning from history, because this is, it's 10 years ago now almost, and it's right there, as Lindsey says. All right, back in just a minute. Okay, back with Lindsey Williams, looking back at a speech by then, he was just a governor in the Federal Reserve System, Ben Bernanke, in November 21st of 2002. All right, Lindsey, go ahead.
The elite created the financial crisis. They created the derivatives. They created the debt. They have been working on this over a period of many, many years. And, Jeff, you know that over the past numbers of years that I've been on your show, I have expressed to you such things as what the currency of the elite are, expressed to you what was said before Mr. Fromm died. If it's written on a piece of paper, it's worth the paper it's written on. And what's happening with oil prices and so on over the years, I've been able to tell you in advance because these people gave me what they were going to do. Well, this last one, of course, back in the summer, of course, they gave me their entire agendas for 2012, and I was so startled at the 5 different agendas which they gave me that I went in studio and produced our very latest DVD series, which just came out a few weeks ago, entitled 2012, The Beginning of the End. And then this one, which you're going to face and need to begin making preparation for. And the best way to describe it is in Mr. Bernanke's speech. And what was said to me basically was, Chaplain, if you want to know what's going to happen next, go here and you find out. So I'm trying my best to help you tonight understand what it is. Let me begin by one expression that you need to give some thought to before we go into his speech. Whenever a nation finds itself in an insurmountable financial debt hole, there are essentially 2 ways they can fix the problem. Now think about these for a moment. On the one hand, they can cut back on expenditures and raise taxes. Well, as you know, the Super Committee refused to do that. Congress doesn't have the intestinal fortitude to do anything about the debt problem. So they have not chosen to do that. Of course, they knew they weren't going to do it in the first place. It was all planned from the time the special committee faced the issue that they were not going to do anything about it. So they have not cut back on expenditures, and they really aren't doing much in the way of raising taxes, maybe a little bit here and yon. Okay, they have one other choice. On the other hand, they can devalue the currency. I hope you caught those words, devalue the currency. A currency devaluation is outright default. Call it anything you want, put it in any pigeonhole you wish. It basically turns out to be default. Now, in then Governor Ben Bernanke's speech in November the 21st, 2002, he stated that if he became the chairman of the Federal Reserve, that he would do in case that the depression or the inflation or deflation or whatever it might be did come, and they knew it was going to happen. It was already planned. The derivative market was such that there's no way in the world this could keep from happening. What's taking place in Europe with Greece and Italy and all of these other countries and the euro, they knew good and well this was going to happen. So in light of what he already knew was planned behind closed doors, so I have been told, he basically gave this speech, and he said in it, and I'm going to put this now in everyday common horse sense terms, rather than the exalted, exuberant words of Ben Bernanke in bankers' terms. And I'm warning you, you'll have to read that speech 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times.
Yeah, I was.
Get it.
Lindsey, I was trying to imagine being there listening to it, and after he would conclude his remarks, scratching my head and saying, "What? What did he say?" Yeah, you're right. It does take analysis. So thank you, and let's hear it simply and straightforwardly put.
He said, "I'll do 5 things. Number 1, if I am faced with another Great Depression or something of that similitude," he said, "number 1, I would bring interest rates to 0. Now, please think, everybody out there in the listening audience, you're capable. You're very bright people. Otherwise, you wouldn't be listening to the Jeff Rense Show. You know most of the issues because Jeff tells them to you all the time. Now, think back on this. Just after Ben Bernanke became chairman of the Federal Reserve, the bubble burst in the real estate market. Finances became worse. Unemployment skyrocketed. And he did, number 1, the first thing he did was he took interest rates to 0. Yeah, 0.3, what difference does it make? For all practical purposes, it's 0. That's history. Mm-hmm. He has already done it.
Right.
He said, I would do a second thing. And as you read his speech, you take my everyday words, and you'll be able to see what he's talking about. He said, number 2, I would buy securities from the banks to expand the federal balance sheet. He did exactly that. Now, not only did he do it from American banks, he also did it from foreign banks. And I'm sure that you recognize, those of you who listen to Jeff Rense Show and you're savvy people, you know that on Christmas Day, while most everyone was making merry and having a great time, actually on Christmas Day, the Federal Reserve gave, you heard those words, gave $600 billion to the European Union. Christmas Day. Now, you probably haven't even caught it because the news had it on very briefly. Most of the stations never covered it. Gave it literally $600 billion on Christmas Day to help bail out the European Union, gave it to the euro, and they dilled it out here and yonder. This is all a part of what he was doing. He bought securities from the banks to expand the Fed balance sheet. The Federal Reserve balance sheet looks real good because it's got in it nothing but junk. All of the credit and all of the debt, all of the derivatives, everything imaginable that are totally worthless, and they're counting them as valued securities. And he said, that's what we're going to do. We'll buy the securities from the banks to expand the Fed balance sheet, and I'm sure you recognize he did exactly that. Then he said a third thing. Now, remember, this speech was given in 2002.
Can we hold that third thing there, Lindsey, and contemplate the first 2 while we take this short pause, and we'll come back and continue. The 5 points, I won't say of light, of Ben Bernanke 10 years ago. Be right back. Okay, back with Lindsey Williams. All right, Lindsey, you might repeat 1 and 2 very quickly. We have a long segment now. You'll be able to get all 5 strung together in a row, and people have had a little chance to think about this, so go ahead.
Before Mr. Ken Fromm died, he gave me so many words of wisdom. I look back on them now, and I say, why didn't I understand what he was saying? He knew exactly what he was saying.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was, and he said it to me back about 2 years ago. He said, Chaplain, when the Federal Reserve begins to buy their own securities, it is all over for the dollar. I did not understand what he was saying because it was unthinkable 3-4 years ago that the Federal Reserve would buy back its own securities. We couldn't even comprehend anything like that. Mr. Fromm already knew it was going to happen. He saw it taking place. And they began this about 1 year ago. And in 1 year's time, the Federal Reserve has bought approximately $3 trillion worth of its own paper. This is unthinkable that such would even be allowed to take place. In fact, the Federal Reserve right now owns as much of the national debt as China does. And China has approximately $3 trillion worth of our paper, either in the form of T-bills or securities of some kind issued by the Federal Reserve. Now, every bit of this was known far in advance, and Fromm said it to me years ago. I didn't understand what he was saying, but Ben Bernanke said it basically in his own speech, and he said it back in 2002. It was on November the 21st, and it was given before the National Economists Club of Washington, D.C. Go read it for yourself. I'm giving it to you in everyday terms. He said, number one, if I were chairman of the Federal Reserve and I was faced with something like we're having right now, I'm putting it in my words, something as we are finding right now on our doorstep, he said, number one, I would bring interest rates to zero. And he's done it. He did it exactly like he said. This is the part that's so scary. He has done everything exactly as he said it, with the exception of one item. And just recently, I was told, go to Mr. Bernanke's speech and you will find out what's going to happen next. That is what I'm getting around to tonight, folks. What is about to happen next? I do not have a date, but it is going to happen. He said, number one, I bring interest rates to zero. He said, number two, I would buy securities from the banks to expand the federal balance sheet. The Fed today has every kind of debt and derivatives that are utterly worthless. Most insecure debt that you could possibly imagine. They've bought it from American banks. They have bought it from foreign banks. They've bought it from monetary institutions of every kind imaginable. And the Fed looks so pretty, but all they're holding is totally worthless debt. Worthless. And nobody else would have it. But now the Fed's holding it. Number three, he said, I would increase the money supply. That's exactly what he did. Look back, you'll see that he did it in this exact order, precisely as he said it. He said, number four, I would buy our country's debt. Country's debt. QE1, QE2, he bailed out the banks exactly as he said he was going to do it. Are you ready? Here it is. He did the first four precisely, intricately, exactly as he said it, in the exact order in which he said he would do it. There's only one thing left that he has not done. I'm actually, in a moment, going to read you the portion in his speech, and I'm going to tell you how he's going to do it. Folks, it was said to me, go and look at that speech, and you will find out what's going to happen next. It is going to take place, and I will suggest as to what you can do to spare yourself, because you're going to face it. Nobody, even ones my age in their 70s, have ever faced in their lifetime what you are going to face, because the next item, and the only item in Mr. Bernanke's speech, which he has not done, is number 5. He said, I will devalue the dollar. That's scary. I have to hesitate when I say this. It is so scary, I've got to read it to you. I'm only going to read to you 2 sentences.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need to read his entire speech. It's pages after page after page, and you're going to have to wade through it numerous times, as I've done. Not just read it once, but numerous times. I'll read you 2 sentences. He said, quote, "It's worth noting that there have been times when exchange rate policy has been an effective weapon. A striking example from U.S. history of Franklin Roosevelt's 40% devaluation of the dollar." Folks, I've got to read this word again.
Yeah.
You have never had a devaluation of the dollar in my lifetime, and I'm in my 70s. None of you have ever seen it. It has not been experienced in the normal lifetime of a person in America today.
Mm-hmm.
You are about to face it. It is going to happen. I'm warning you, it has been given to me just as the other things the elite have said to me in the past. They told me about gasoline prices. They told me what the Fed was going to do. They told me exactly what was going to happen. I have given it to you time after time, and it's happened exactly like this. Don't you dare go and say Lindsey Williams is a prophet. Now, I'm begging you not to do that. I am not a prophet. I do not get this from divine revelation. I do not get this from tea leaves. I do not get this from esoteric sources. This comes directly from them. These are the words of one of the elitists himself, and it was merely said to me, go and look at this, and you will know what's going to happen next. And I'm going to read it to you one more time. I hope it's beginning to sink in, and I hope you're shaking in your shoes. A striking example from U.S. history is Franklin Roosevelt's 40% devaluation of the dollar against gold in 1933 and 34. Now let me explain it.
All right, Lindsey, hold on. We're going to take a break, come back, and then we're going to explain that. Devaluation is a word that most Americans don't understand. Now, the Iranian currency lost 10% of its value. That's an involuntary devaluation. But FDR chopped off 40% of the value of the dollar. That's extraordinary. Now, remember, Bernanke is not making this stuff up on the fly or by himself. He is mouthing policy as it has been given to him by his controllers. And we'll be right back with Lindsey in just a minute to find out what this really means to you and to I. Back with Lindsey Williams. What does devaluation mean to the average American? Will this be a move across the board, or will it just affect some institutions, some segments of the population in some fashion or another? And if it is a complete across-the-board devaluation, will it really have a direct impact on people? These are questions we're going to get, and questions you've already heard. So go ahead and give us your best analytical advice about this pending move. And it does seem to be exactly what's going to happen.
If the elitists have their way, the American currency will be devalued. And if they have their way, the American currency will be devalued at the rate of 40%. That's exactly what Mr. Bernanke said in his speech. He was very plain about it. One scenario as to how it could happen. Friday afternoon, the bank's closed. There will be no warning, by the way. You won't hear about this a week ahead of time. You won't see it
no.
It won't be
That's
on
right.
CNN News. It won't be on Fox News. It won't be on any of the major news channels. You will not. The only place you will ever hear about that is right here on Jeff Rense show tonight, and other places that I'm giving this, begging the American people to listen while they have time. The banks close on Friday afternoon. You hear nothing until Monday morning. Monday morning, it's announced to you that your currency has just been devalued by 40%. Example, you have $1,000 in your bank checking account. On Monday morning, it's worth $600. You have $1,000 stuck between the mattress as a hedge against tough times. They'll say, bring it in. We'll be glad to make you an exchange. Exchange for what? I don't know. They haven't told me that. They just merely said there's going to be a devaluation. You bring it into the bank, and the bank says, I'll give you $600 for your $1,000. Now, how did Franklin Delano Roosevelt do it? As mentioned in Mr. Bernanke's speech, back in those days, people still trusted the government. They still had gold in their pocket. In fact, their gold, 1-ounce gold piece, was worth $20, exactly as is stamped on it. Some of you have seen those 1-ounce gold pieces if you're fortunate enough to be able to buy it back when it was cheaper, or you buy it now at $1,500 an ounce back then, and you still see it stamped on it. It says $20. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt, the scoundrel, the liar, he knew what he was doing when he did it. He said, oh, you must be patriotic. You've got to help your country. We are in a financial crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And if you will bring in your $20 gold piece, we will give you a piece of paper which it states on it is a gold certificate. You can't even get them now, by the way, unless somebody has them from back in those days. Today it's a Federal Reserve note and is utterly worthless. But he said, bring in your $20 gold piece, as only he could say it. And he said, we will give you a Federal Reserve, or we will give you a $20 gold certificate.
Mm-hmm.
People did. Some people did. There were a few people who had sense enough not to turn it in. They thought there was something in the grass, and there was. And he said, okay, bring it in, and and he said, I will give you your $20 piece of gold certificate paper. A few months later, knowing good and well what he was going to do, he all of a sudden, out of a clear blue sky, with no warning to anybody, said, gold prices now are no longer $20 an ounce. They are $35 an ounce. Mm-hmm. And that person who had that $20 piece of paper that said it's redeemable in gold, you now would have to pay $35 in order to get back your $20 1 ounce of gold. If you went to the bank to get it, which you could do back in those days, you take it and figure it for yourself. From $20 to $35 is a 40% devaluation of the currency, which back in those days was gold and silver. They didn't trust paper as they trust it today, and he devalued it by 40%. Now, what's going to happen to you? Please, I'm trying to tell you, this is what they said. Go and look at Bernanke's speech, and you will know what's going to happen next. If the elite have their way, it is planned to have a devaluation of the currency. Do you have the slightest idea how this is going to affect the entire world? Can you imagine how irate China is going to be, who holds $3 trillion worth of our paper, and when it is devalued by 40%, I don't doubt that there won't be a single product left. I've said this for the past 2 years, folks. You've heard me say it on Jeff Rense shows in the archives. I wouldn't doubt that there won't be a product left in Walmart and Target marked made in China. They will be so angry. Can you imagine how it's going to impact our country when those banks in Europe, which were just given the euro over Christmas Day, when the Federal Reserve gave the European Union $600 billion while you were having a good time at home enjoying Christmas with no accounting whatsoever, just gave it away, and now it is devalued by 40%. Can you imagine the condition of what's going to take place in this world? We are headed for one of the most catastrophic events that has taken place in our life. They have no choice.
Mm-hmm.
There is nothing that can be done about this. This is irreversible. Bernanke knew this. He knew there were only two ways in order to handle this catastrophic debt. By the way, did you see the forecast today? They forecast today. You know, our president demanded by last Friday that Congress give him $1.2 additional trillion. Do you realize that we are approaching $15 trillion plus in national debt, and it is going up $1 trillion every few months? Now, Bernanke knew, and they knew there were only two ways of handling this. Number one, cut back on expenditures and raise taxes. They've refused to do both. There's only one alternative left. They can devalue the currency.
Mm-hmm.
This is what's in the wind. It was told to me. I am trying my best to help you understand. Now you say, what can we do? Well, let me tell you what will happen. I've talked to a number of people, Jeff, and to the best that I can surmise, this is what will probably take place. All right, let's say that gold today is worth $1,500 an ounce. I don't know exactly what it was this morning, but I'm just taking off the top of my head. And say that an ounce of gold this morning was probably worth $1,500 or wherever it was. That gold will likewise go up and increase in value. I'm predicting, according to what I'm hearing, within 24 hours' time, it will increase proportionately to the devaluation. So if gold is worth $1,500 an ounce right now, and let's say that there was a 50% devaluation, that gold would be worth $3,000 an ounce tomorrow morning. I am not telling you to rush out and buy gold and silver. I am trying my best to help you understand that if you have paper between the mattress, you're in trouble. If you have paper in the bank, in that bank account, you're in trouble. You are going to lose 40% of it. It has happened in many countries. Go back and look what happened. Different countries did it different ways. But I am gathering from what my sources are telling me and what Bernanke said in his own speech, that it'll be across the board with currency that you have between the mattress in your house or in the bank or whatever it may be. What will happen to your 401ks, your IRAs, your mutual funds? I do not know how that. What they have many methods that they can do things, but you're going to see. Number one, if the elite have their way. They don't always get that way, but if the elite have their way, there will be a devaluation.
They will.
And number two, it will be at 40%, and you need to take immediate action because you'll have no warning ahead of time.
And Obama will be the one to announce this. It won't be Bernanke, right?
Probably so. I have not been told that. Bernanke has already announced it.
Well, I mean, in terms of a fireside chat, an FDR kind of a thing with Americans.
Yeah. I go back to that expression so much. The elite, they tell you what they're going to do before they do it. And they said to me, go back and look at this, and you'll see what's going to happen next. Then after it happens...
Clearly there. The word devaluation is all over the place in that document toward the end. Yeah.
And he'll come back. They'll come back and say, well, we told you we were going to do it. Why didn't you listen to us?
Well, remember also that the world movers and shakers have been trying to acquire as much physical gold as they possibly can in the last several years. That's why there's so little. Remember when Venezuela's Chavez said, I want my gold, and it shocked the world markets? They couldn't find the gold easily. Took them a while to scruff it up and send it to Venezuela. He didn't make a lot of friends with that. But he knew. He knows what's coming. I think you've pretty well laid it out here tonight for us, too. And
the elite are buying gold in particular. They're buying some silver, but the elite are buying gold by the tons.
All the physical gold they can get.
Yeah. Yes, as fast as they can get it. Now, please, I beg of you, those of you who have not gotten it, just a matter of weeks ago, I made a 3-hour DVD presentation entitled 2012, The Beginning of the End. I described in that presentation the 5 agendas that the elite had given me, which was so startling that they will do in 2012. I give the Devil's Messiah agenda. This is, even I sit back in amazement at it. I tell you why the crash hasn't taken place yet. They have intentionally held it off for a reason. I tell you why we haven't gone to war with Iran yet. This is startling beyond words also. Mr. Fromm gave me some of this before he died. And why we haven't gone to war with Iran yet. All of this is a part of it. Now, please understand, 2012, the beginning of the end, and those of you who have been taking notes, please write down, if you wish, you may go to get this to www.prophecyclub.com on the web, prophecyclub.com, or you can go to our toll-free lines. The toll-free numbers are workable 24 hours a day. The operator is standing by, and the toll-free number is 888-799-6111, or on the web, www.prophecyclub.com, or toll-free 888-799-6111. 2012, the beginning of the end, the agendas of the elite for 2012. I think when they told me those things, Jeff, they already understood, even though they didn't say it until just recently, what was going to happen in relation to the devaluation. And again, I will state, I have not given you a date for this. I do not know the date. You need to prepare, because I think Jeff and I both agree that it'll be done without any warning, Jeff.
Agreed. Totally agree. Lindsey, thank you for being here. It's great to talk with you as we begin the year of 2012, and I see no reason to dispute what you see in the cards for us and what your sources tell you and what Bernanke himself told us 10 years ago. It's right there. It's the only thing. It's the only option they have. Agreed. Take care of yourself. Okay, Lindsey, thank you. We'll talk to you again soon. All right, and we'll be right back.